Hello everyone and welcome back to the Magnus Carlsen Invitational. This is game 3. Again, Magnus with the white pieces. The result is 1-1, so one victory each. And we are going to have a repetition of the line they played in the first game. However, Hikaru will decide against that bishop to b7 line. So we're not gonna discuss all that much. Magnus with the white pieces. d4, knight f6, same as in game 1. We have c4, e6, sorry about that. We have knight to f3 and d5. So again, Queen's Gambit Declined on the board, knight c3, bishop e7, and again Magnus goes for this bishop to f4 line. We have castles and e3, preparing to develop the light square bishop, knight bd7 and c5, same as in game 1. c6, preparing b6, and of course h3. Everything the same as in game 1. We have b6, b4, a5, and a3. And now h6. So still everything the same as in game 1, bishop to d3. And here we mentioned that Nakamura had already this game with the white pieces against Topalo, where he went bishop to a6, but now he goes bishop to b7. But here he didn't like that. Bishop to b7 is not a mistake or anything. The engine very much likes the idea. But he was left with that sad bishop in game 1, so instead he decides for bishop to a6, which is pretty much what everyone plays in this position. So Magnus castles, and now queen to c8. We have queen to c2, preparing, now connecting rooks, and the bishop captures on d3 now that the queen was developed, so you make white lose a tempo. But a queen captures on d3, and now queen to b7. Black also develops the queen, connects the rooks. And now there is, again, we can transpose into the Nakamura Topalov game after knight to d2, but here we have queen to c2 backed by Magnus. And it is as of move 15 now that we have a completely new game. So if the c file opens up, maybe you can put some rooks on the c file, maybe you can do some damage to that c6 pawn. But rook f to c8, Nakamura immediately defends it, places the rook on c8. We have rook f to b1 now by Magnus, goes after, puts the rook on the same file as the queen. And now Nakamura trades. A captures on b4, a captures, and now again bishop to d8 with the same maneuver as in the game 1. Wanting to go bishop to c7 to trade off Carlsen's dark square bishop. So queen to c1. Now Magnus wants to trade a pair of rooks and then put the other rook to a1. So he wants the queen from c1 to defend the rook on a1. Bishop to c7, and now Magnus trades. We have captures. That's not a captures. Captures, and now captures on c7. Queen captures and rook to a1, now offering to trade off the other pair of rooks as well. We have queen to b7 and now rook to a3, with the idea of doubling up with queen to a1. So knight to e8 by Hikaru. He wants to shift the knight over to c7 and then from there maybe to the queen side. But also you kind of want to play f6 if everything gets traded off, so you don't allow this knight any ideas here. Well, okay, not g5 obviously, but e5. So knight to e2 by Magnus, and now rook captures on a3. We have queen captures and knight to c7 now. Now Hikaru is ready to offer a queen trade with queen a6 or a8. Knight to f4 by Magnus, and now queen to a6, offering a queen trade. We have queen captures, knight captures, now attacking the b4 pawn, and knight to d3. Magnus just defends it. So here we have all of these knights in a pretty much a closed endgame, so obviously we are going to have a lot of horsing around. So f6, taking away the e5 square from Carlsen's knights, and now knight back to d2. We have king to f7. Hikaru starts bringing the king into the game, and the Magnus will do the same, but first f4, grabbing more control of the e5 square. We have knight back to c7, now shifting the knight over to b5, and king to f2. We have knight to b5 and now king to f3. We have knight to c3, and now comes g4. So nicely just pushing. We have g5 by Hikaru and now f5. Pretty much asking Hikaru to push the pawn. So he does. We have e5 and now e4 is the threat, and of course Magnus not interested in trading here. So he goes back, knight to c1, and Hikaru continues advancing with e4 check. king back to f2 by Magnus, and now king to e7. So now the king side is completely blocked off, the center is blocked off, and well, there is some action to be done on the queen side. You still have to figure out what happens if in the future maybe ideas like b5 are played, but that's pretty much that regarding breakthroughs in the position. So here, knight to f1 by Magnus. He sees that knight to g3 to h5 could result in this f6 pawn becoming vulnerable sometimes in the future. So just knight to f1, we have knight to a4 by Nakamura, and now king to e2. We have knight back to b2 and king to d2 now. Knight c4 check, we have king to c3, also the knight from f1 nicely defends the e3 pawn. And now knight to b8, we have knight to b3, and now comes knight to a6. And here Carlsen decides for this very nice c captures on b6. We have knight captures and now knight to a5. He goes after the c6 pawn and king to d7 now, defending it. But now no one is guarding the f6 pawn, so now this knight jumps to g3. He wants to come to h5 and pick up the f6 pawn. So king to c7 and now knight to h5. The king made room for the knight on d7, so knight d7 guarding the f6 pawn, and now knight back to b3, preparing to put this knight on this very nice c5 outpost. So king to d8, now Nakamura wants to shift the king over to defend the f6 pawn, and now knight to c5, again offering some trades here. And if you capture here, you just allow Carlsen's king to march up the board, so not really what you want to do. So here knight 8 to b8 by Nakamura, but now Carlsen finds the only breakthrough that exists on the board, and that is b5. This is how you make progress. You clear the b4 square for your king, and you will recapture the pawn later, as the two knights are unable to defend the pawn. So c captures and king to b4 now, going after the b5 pawn. Knight to c6 check, we have king captures, and now knight to a7 check. We have king to a6 by Magnus, and now knight captures on c5 with check. And here Magnus captures on a7, and this is actually not the best. Capturing on a7 results only in a draw, unfortunately for Magnus. However, d captures on c5 is the correct way to go, but it's of course a rapid game, and you don't have a lot of time to calculate. So Magnus captured here, but now Hikaru is the one who makes a wrong turn. Instead of knight to d3, he goes knight to b3, and knight to b3 does make sense. You want to go knight b3, you want to capture this pawn here, and after capture start pushing your e pawn. However, Hikaru and while this is not the best, knight d3 is hard to calculate, because after knight captures on f6, the point is you have knight f4. You defend this pawn and attack this one, and once white makes a move, now you kick back the knight, and you kind of don't want to go to h5. It's a very sad square now for the white knight. Black will always be able to capture here on h3. You're defending this pawn, and it shouldn't be more than a draw. So probably we would see a repetition here. Knight check, king here, knight here, and a nice repetition. However, Hikaru went for king to knight to b3, and now it's a bit different. We have king to b6 by Magnus, and now king to d7. You cannot go for this right away, because if captures, and you start pushing, knight g3 covers the e2 square, so there's nothing happening here. So king d7 by Hikaru, but now knight captures on f6 with check. Of course, you have to capture, you cannot allow the king to defend it. King to d6, now knight e8 check, king to d7, and the knight to c7 now, going after this pawn, but also now you have a passed f pawn that black has to worry about, and here there really is no good move for Nakamura. So he tried one last try, knight captures on d4, but Magnus of course just recaptured that and said that there is nothing for black to do here, and it was in this position on move 56 that Nakamura resigned the game. Problem is that you have a check, and that's why you will reach the pawn. For example, e3, you have knight to a6, which will be followed by knight to c5 check. And it doesn't matter if you move the king, you still get knight c5, and then you jam the knight to d3, which covers the e1 square. So here just this check, you move the king, and now knight to d3 reaches e1, and Magnus is just up a knight, and of course completely winning. So Hikaru noticed this after he captures on d4, and he resigned here. So this is game 3 of their match in the Magnus Carlsen Invitational. Magnus is now leading 2-1, and we'll see what happens. In the next game, Hikaru must win on demand if he wants to take the match into Armageddon. And don't worry about the other matchup, Ding versus Alireza. I will, of course, show those games as well. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. There was a lot of horsing around, but you know, it's never simple, as you can see here. I would like to thank Pierre Asaf, Andreas Michalovsky, Dominic Robson, Anturanga Tantra, and Kian Paya for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Invitational. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.